neighborhood. At the outset, I think we will once again define the same rules that the speaker I would request to speak for only about 20 to 25 minutes. And we would have the bell going at 20 and followed by another one at 25. And the remaining time we would keep it more for the discussions. And ladies and gentlemen, while we are at the discussions, I have only one request to make, is that there will always be shortcomings, there will always be strengths, weaknesses in every system. It need not necessarily be correct to say that whichever system is good, it has got no weaknesses. No, it could be either way around. There could be a mix of strengths, there could be a mix of weaknesses. And what we would be endeavoring to do is that let us not get into any blame game or passing off the allegations that why can't this organization do this and why cannot another organization take on this particular job. I think all that we would definitely sort out, but this is perhaps not really the forum to carry on with the blame game. That is one. And secondly, since we are all in public domain, may I request you to exercise your discretion with the kind of questions that are being asked. Notwithstanding, any opinions are always welcome, which may not be commented upon. Also notwithstanding, in case you are not very satisfied with the kind of response that has been given, I assure you that before the day is over, when we do meet up informally at night, all those questions can be addressed individually and all the responses would be given, and we will ensure that the speaker or the person who has asked the question is adequately satisfied. I think with that, may I request Jan Sabharwal sir to kindly start the call.
Air Marshal Malhotra, distinguished guests and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to be back amongst old colleagues and friends, and some of officers with whom we had fought the 71 war are also present here. Gentlemen, the existence of the special forces is probably as old as the history of warfare itself. In the history of every army, there have been a couple of units because of the fighting skills, loyalty, and discipline have been considered cut above the rest. Special forces are known all over the world by different names, but they are essentially small fighting forces, specially trained and equipped for a lightning raid against the enemy. They work in uniform and are introduced in the battle zone by land, sea, or air. They have a very focused task to support and further the objectives of the regular forces. They are cost-effective and force multiplier. A peep into the Indian history way back about 2,000 years shows that we had some people specially equipped and trained to carry out special tasks. In April 1963, Shivaji, a king and the commander-in-chief of his army, personally led a commando raid with 120 men against Mughal governor Shaista Khan at a place called Lal Mahal in Pune. In 1943, winged long-range penetration forces called Chendets went into Burma, which operated behind Japanese front line that had 3rd Battalion, the 4th Gurkha Rifles of the Indian Army as part of the force. In 1962, after the war, Special Frontier Force was raised, mainly from the Tibetan exiles, to operate in Tibet. In 1965, under Major Meg Singh, a Meghdut force was raised and used against Pakistan which blew up number of bridges, helped capture 2 pickets, Raja and Chand Tekering Punch sector, and established link-up with 68th Brigade south of Haji Pir. On 1st July 1966, 9 para-commando was raised. It was planned to be theatre and terrain specific for Jammu and Kashmir. In 1967, that is the next year, 10 para-commando was raised, designated to operate in Western Desert. During 1971 war, both the commando units, 9 and 10, were extensively used, and they gave a good account of themselves during the war. Raid on Mandol, in which the guns were destroyed, was carried out during this period. For their effort, both the 9 and 10 para-commandos were awarded battle honors and theatre honors beside many gallantry awards. In 1979, when I was commanding 50 Independent Parachute Brigade, one of the oldest battalions of the Indian Army, 1 Para Punjab, was then commanded by the great mountaineer, Lieutenant Colonel Avtar Singh Chima, with Sukhi Man as his 2IC. They were placed under my command to be converted into para-commandos. This was to be Army Headquarters Reserve. Their training included deep sea diving and high altitude, high opening parachutes. Later on, 21 Marathas, 2 para, 3 para, and 4 para have been converted as Special Forces battalions. NSG was raised for anti-hijacking and against terrorism. Today we have Marcos from the Navy and Garuda Commando Force of the Indian Air Force. Special Forces battalions have been used in Sri Lanka against LTTE to raid their jungle safe havens. General Tej Pathak and General Hardy Leda both commanded the battalions in Sri Lanka. In 1999, Special Forces battalions took part in Kargil, where they conducted a number of raids against Pakistanis to remove Pakistani SSG, light infantry, and militants who had infiltrated and occupied our mountain tops on our side of the line of control. In June 2000, in Sierra Leone, as part of United Nations Keeping Force, 23 men of 58GR were surrounded and held captive by Revolutionary United Front. About 120 commandos were airlifted from New Delhi on a rescue mission, which was a complete success. Employment. Gentlemen, since subsequent speakers are covering employment in conventional war and strategic tasks, I will not touch on those. I will restrict myself to conflict areas and situations short of war. We are already shifting from an era of wars to an era of conflicts. Considering India's economic power, its strategic concerns are not likely to be restricted to the Indian subcontinent. It may cover the entire northern Indian Ocean and from Africa in the west to Malacca states in the east, and to include Afghanistan, Iran, Central Asian republics, China, Myanmar, and the littoral countries Southeast Asia. Our long borders with China, Pakistan, and our vast island territories also need to be protected. Special forces would have a very important role to play in this. Both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons, which may well prevent the struggle over Kashmir from escalating. But because of this, conflict has now developed into low-intensity operations. Jammu and Kashmir is a very good example of how nations may take advantage and keep the operations to low intensity. Pakistan is organizing, training and supporting infiltrators and terrorists and pushing them to India. It is a state-sponsored terrorism. Special forces all over the world, including ours, have been tasked to counter terrorism. Hence, we must know what is terrorism today. Gentlemen, terrorism is not a random act of violence or a crime. It is not a proxy war, it is war. Terrorism is a new method of warfare, a war waged through different means, undeclared war, but war all the same. It is the cheapest option of war, best suited for an economically weaker country. This war has no ethics, no morals, no code of conduct. India has fought 3 wars, conventional wars, 1962, 65, and 1971. And our total casualties during this war have been, 3 wars have been 37,000. In terrorism since 1983, our casualties have been 66,000. Gentlemen, if this is not war, what is war? Every act of terrorism must be considered an act of war and therefore responded to accordingly. The principle of hot pursuit must be followed. The enemy's soft underbelly must be hit where it's going to hurt him most. In the Indian subcontinent, especially on the Western Front, this kind of warfare will be the norm. And we are likely to have situations more and more where we'll have to fight terrorism and the terrorists from across the border. About other tasks, special forces can play a very major role in gathering intelligence, human intelligence, as well as signal intelligence. Afghanistan is a very fine example of this. Laser designation of valuable targets and direction of long-range artillery, reconnaissance and surveillance missions deep in enemy territory, establishing foothold prior to intervention, training of friendly regulars, rescue missions, punitive strikes as part of coercive diplomacy, raids on terrorist camps and hideouts. Gentlemen, know-how to produce chemical and biological weapons is available on the net. Soon, nuclear weapons could be in the reach of terrorists and jihadis. Special units will be tasked to handle them. They should be tasked now, as they'll be asked to locate, seize, render safe, and recover weapons of mass destruction. For this, they would need many inputs, and they also need months and months of preparation and rehearsals to carry out this very difficult task. Special forces could be force of choice for conducting operations, including across the borders, without inviting risk of war. Dealing with asymmetric opponents such as terrorists, insurgents, rebels, special forces become the obvious choice. Lessons. I think it's time now that we have inter-service special forces headquarters with special forces cells at command headquarters level. Colonel Charlie Beckwith, after failure of his mission in Iran, said, and I quote, "We went out, found bits and pieces, people and equipment, brought them together to perform a highly complex task. Each part performed not as a team, nor did they all have the same motivation," unquote. Therefore, gentlemen, the lesson from that is we should give the Special Forces headquarters all the resources, all the helicopters, all the aircraft they require, and other equipment required directly under their command so that they can perform as one team. At the moment, we have, each service has got a small training establishment to train its special forces. I think it is time that we have a special forces school in the country to cater the requirement of all special forces. It will not only be economical, it will also be very good for special forces. There's a case to reorganize NSG, the special action groups which are tasked for anti-hijacking and counter-terrorism need to be placed under command of a professional soldier who has the past experience of being in special forces. Lessons from history suggest the special forces who are consulted at the highest level in decision making produce outstanding results. About new raisings. Chairman, I don't think we should be in a great hurry to raise more raisings. We need to consolidate what we have got. Give them good men, good equipment, the best state-of-art equipment, good leaders, young leaders. It is man who matters, not men. It is not the quality which is going to go, it is the quality which is matter, not the quantity. It takes around 2 to 3 years to train a special forces soldier. All SF battalions must have 100% complement of officers they authorize. SF units, because of a high attrition rate, should have reserve of men, officers, and equipment. Raising special forces and training them for the task is a time-consuming affair. The real challenge is in organizing and tasking them correctly. If they're not organized for the ultimate unconventional, they will undertake the same at a very high cost. On the other hand, if they're not tasked correctly, it'd be waste of a valuable asset. Special forces require a very high state of motivation. All leaders must ensure this. In a special forces task, the most crucial aspect of the task is the ruthless, forceful execution. I've seen many tasks failing, good, well-planned tasks failing because the execution was weak. On the other hand, weak plans have succeeded because of very forceful execution. Our weakness in planning appears to be we plan big, but are weak in implementation. My advice is have modest goals, but be ruthless in executing and achieving those goals. Regional orientation and knowledge of cultural and social customs of the people of the area in which you're likely to operate must be known. Special forces people should be allowed to visit those areas now so that they can acquaint with them and know them. We should have very close liaison with special forces of friendly countries, and annual exchange visits must be organized. In conclusion, I would say nuclear war cannot be won, hence is not likely to be fought. Conventional war, because of heavy price tag on a new weapon system, would be a great strain on a nation's economic resources. Just to give you an idea, M1 main battle tank which the American Army is using costs $4 million apiece. Mirage 2000 is around 100 million US dollars apiece. B-52 stealth bomber is around 2 billion. And if somebody wants to have a nuclear aircraft carrier with full complements of the aircraft, it's going to be around 28 to 30 billion US dollars. Therefore, it is obvious that conventional war, only the rich or the super rich countries will be able to afford it. Combined with this is the fact that affluent nations will no longer be prepared to accept heavy casualties in battle. On the other hand, economically weaker countries would continue using terrorism as a new method of warfare. Countering terrorism will continue to be a major concern of most nations. Hence, special forces will continue to be tasked to counter terrorism. We should have special laws and special courts to speedily deal with terrorists. The way Afzal Guru and Kasab have been handled is a folly. Special forces will be the option of choice of situation short of war in a politically sensitive missions. In the days ahead, special forces will be in great demand and many tasks await them. They must be organized, equipped with the state-of-the-art equipment and weapons, and be trained to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Mantra of special forces could be daring, courage, and surprise, as these are the ultimate weapons of a commando. Thank you.
How do you enlarge it? Enlarge karo. Okay. Mr. Chairman, eminent panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The topic given to me was war in 21st century and role of Indian special forces in conventional war. I do not perceive that we will ever be fighting a conventional war in isolation. Plus, in my perception, the role of special forces is going to be more and more below the threshold of war. And therefore, I've modified my presentation accordingly. So let me firstly briefly touch upon the security environment which is in India's immediate neighborhood. India borders the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, which is the seat of terror today, where you have ideological fuel available and wholly religious fundamental platform for extremism. As far as Pakistan is concerned, you see it getting more and more radicalized. In fact, the recent assassinations you saw of Governor Tasir and Minister Bhatti and the aftermath of that proves this amply. If you look at the nexus between the ISI and the LET is actually the Lashkar-e-Toiba, is a covert arm of the ISI, and the LET has gone and filled up the voids in the Al-Qaeda. Now that nexus is of great concern to us. You look at the Somali pirates today, the way they are homing on to India, could there be a connection with the LTT, the LET, and the Al-Qaeda? After all, a number of years back, the Al-Qaeda had sent cadres for training to the sea wing of the LTTE, based on which they had gone and attacked USS Cole. All these actions we have to look into and monitor them. WikiLeaks is reinforcing the duplicity of Pakistan and the covert support it continues to give to the Taliban and to Al-Qaeda. The focus of the US, the European Union, and the NATO, and the world at large today is at Al-Qaeda and at the Taliban, and not Pakistan per se. And that is what encourages Pakistan. And the impending thinning out of the US forces in Pakistan also emboldens Pakistan to continue with its policy of duplicity, and it is unwilling to act against any terrorist organizations operating from within Pakistan which are targeting Afghanistan and India. If the Taliban becomes stronger, it will be looking further into Afghanistan, it will be looking into the CIS countries, and it will be looking into India. If you look at the right bottom of this slide, it is actually Zhou Enlai, which in the 60s recommended to Ayub Khan, the president of Pakistan, to raise a militia force to fight India and not a conventional war. And that is what the jihadis of today are. In fact, their infrastructure started coming up, the armed modules started coming up in India in early 1990s. Now, what about China? China provides tacit support to Pakistan in its jihadi strategy, and in fact has been providing protection to it in the United Nations also for any action to be taken against their mullahs or terrorists. This is in keeping with China's ambitions, the strategic ambitions which will keep India in check. Chinese strategic footprints today in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, its arming, training, and supporting insurgencies in India, its claiming of Arunachal Pradesh, and the unholy nuclear nexus with Pakistan has got connotations for India. There was a report in the Aviation Week in December which talked of Chinese military advisors working with Taliban how to fight and battle the NATO. China and Pakistan's increasing discernible efforts to establish links with the Maoist insurgency in India through the Maoists of Nepal, through the Northeast insurgents, and through the radicals in Kerala are of grave concern to us. As far as Nepal is concerned, although China spawned the insurgency, the Maoist insurgency there, at the moment, Nepal and Myanmar have taken a turn for the better. But we have to watch out for the future. For example, if the Maoists come into complete power in Nepal, it will have connotations for the Maoist insurgency in India. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, it is today clamping down on terror. But there is dormant capability available in that country of terrorist organizations like the JI, JMB, and the Harkatul Islami Bangladesh, which can turn radical anytime. As far as the Sri Lankans are concerned, LTT is defeated, but it's not dead. Let us switch on to the conflict now. There's been a paradigm shift already brought out a number of times. Clear trend that irregular or asymmetric forces have emerged with greater strategic value over conventional and even nuclear forces. This is the truth. Subconventional conflicts characterized by intrastate strife have gained ascendancy over traditional conflicts, which used to be mostly conventional interstate wars. The transnational nature of these threats and the increasing involvement of state actors in using subconventional conflicts have increased their complexity. Non-state actors have added a new dimension to LIC. And they are increasingly acquiring conventional capabilities that were either earlier exclusive, preserved only of nation states. Technology empowers the terrorists to cause severe damage through cyber, financial, and kinetic attacks. Likelihood of them acquiring WMDs is, of course, a major concern. The spectrum of conflict could therefore range from conflicts between states to conflicts with non-state actors and proxies. Conventional conflict could either be preceded in conjunction or succeeded by a period of irregular conflict, which would require low-intensity conflict and stabilizing operations. India is faced with multifarious threats and challenges related to terrorism, border management, and maritime security, demographic assault from failing states, aside from conventional and nuclear threats. And India is already in the middle of asymmetric war. We have some 30-odd homegrown terrorist organizations operating in the country. And the Maoist insurgency has actually created the biggest fault line in India. There is an urgent need to address these non-traditional challenges. The scope of these scenarios is large, with limitless employment possibilities for special forces. So 21st century conflict scenarios in the Indian context may be summarized as, I mentioned, we are already battling asymmetric threats. Windows for conventional war and nuclear backdrop will continue to exist, but will be subject to intense international pressure for early termination. And conventional war will overlap the ongoing asymmetric war. Both the attack on the Indian Parliament and 26/11 Mumbai terror attack indicate that India is at a disadvantage, relying only on conventional response and politico-diplomatic measures. We have not built a deterrent for irregular warfare. Indian Special Forces were born in 1965, brought out by General Sabharwal. The strength is more than the US Special Forces today, but not 1/10 their capabilities. There is ambiguity in India on the difference between special forces and special operation forces. For example, if you look up Wikipedia, that will show no less than 50 special forces to India, in India, including all the police forces, Python, Octopus, Jaguar, the names. Now, this ambiguity also at times is there in military cross-sections. Who exactly are the special forces that we want to call special forces? They are the special forces of the three services. They are the special action groups of the National Security Guard, and they are special groups of the Special Frontier Force. And the SAGs and the SGs of the NSG and the SFF are actually 100% Army on deputation. We have gone in for rapid expansion of special forces.